Hello, good people of the world, family and friends. Sarah Oyerinde here on my back porch in my home in Georgia. I am here today to talk with you about this book, A Hope for Wings by Al Parker, and also to talk with you about my website, my poetry/writing website. So first of all, I want to tell you about my website. I call it Land of the Living. It is a poetry/writing website/ whatever other creative things I do, and I think they're worthy of sharing. The web address is sarahoyerinde.com, but the website itself is called Land of the Living. Please check out my website, check out the poems, check out the poetry, the writing, anything else in the future that I publish up there. I'm an artist, I'm a writer, so of course I want people to read and check my stuff out, and my hope is that it touches your life in some way, that it entertains you in some way, that it gets you to think. And as you check it out and you like it, feel free to share it with others if you feel so compelled to. So one poem that I've written recently that I really want you to check out, really the whole purpose of this video, is called Bearded Owl Gave Us a Gift. So the poem Bearded Owl Gave Us a Gift is about how recently I heard a barred owl hooting out his signature hoot, which sounds like who cooks for you all. I heard him recently doing this in our woods here nearby, and it reminded me of Al Parker, who wrote this book. And whenever I was a kid, like he came out to our church camp. Al and his family were actually a part of our church for a while in Bloomington, Indiana. And almost every summer, like when I was a kid, he came to the camp and he would take us out into the woods on night hikes. And I think I remember some day hikes too. But he would teach us about the wildlife and the natural environment. And really specifically, he would always call barred owls in from the forest and like directly over our heads. And the barred owl would like call back to him. And that was a really neat experience. And so the poem is kind of about that. Please check it out on my poetry website, and also at the end of the poem you will see that I am giving away 3 copies of this book. Alright, so this book is really what I want to talk about. A Hope for Wings by Al Parker, Musings of a Raptor Hacker, and Tales of Bird of Prey Recovery. So back in the 1980s and 90s, Al Parker worked with the Department of Natural Resources in Indiana, and he and others were instrumental in bringing back the bald eagle to the Ohio Valley area. They helped to repopulate the area with bald eagles and also with other rare birds of prey, probably ones that we're not familiar with as a national population, but as a national population we know the bald eagle, at least I hope we do. Anyhow, so this book has a lot of stories and observations from that time period when Al was working with the birds, and he really takes you into his world of being with the birds, either in high places anyways, in hack towers or in trees, in an eagle's nest, or even on top of some skyscrapers, because he did some work inside the city of Indianapolis as well. And so he has a lot of experiences that me as a common person have never had before in my life. And so I find it very entertaining and interesting. Something else that Al does in this book is he helps the reader be aware of how related to wildlife we really are. And it kind of makes sense because we were both created by God. Human beings were created by God, and birds and wildlife were created by God. And birds struggle with in life just as much as we do. That's something that kind of surprised me. I wouldn't think of birds as struggling in life. The Bible says that God takes care of the birds and the wildlife, and so why should, just as God takes care of them, why should we worry? So I just kind of feel like animals, I felt like animals are kind of worry-free animals, and worry-free beings, but it seems that they, according to Al's observations, they struggle in life just as much as we do. So there's one story that's really fascinating in here about a bird couple that were struggling to reproduce. It took them like 3 times before they were successful in raising up some young. And then also birds are like us as well in that they have distinct voices. I found his observations in here about this one in particular, about hearing the birds calling and how he could recognize. So after days and weeks of watching and listening, I was able to recognize the voices of individual birds, much the same way you learn the sounds of each person in your family. By this, I also knew who was home. So I thought that was interesting. I've never spent that kind of time with birds in which I would be able to recognize their distinct voices. But apparently, birds have distinct voices, just like human beings. The book also has made me realize just how much work has gone into conserving and bringing back different species of birds and different species of wildlife in the world. And it helps me to not take the wildlife for granted so much. At the beginning of the book, he talks about Canada geese and how, like 100 years ago, down in the lower 48 states, we wouldn't have found nesting Canadian geese. But today, because of the work that people have done, we see Canada geese all over, and we even sometimes find them pesky. But after reading this, I'm just like, I actually really appreciate the Canada geese now. Yeah, so that's just another thing that the book does. He shows you the hard work that's been put into bringing birds back and conserving them, and also the thoughts that has had to go into like protecting the birds from predators, and the inventions that he's come up with in order to do this work. Okay, another thing that I enjoyed about this book is the language that Al Parker uses. It's very descriptive and vivid at times. Here's an example. Hours of tedium on the tower were broken by random moments of excitement. Deer would often walk beneath the tower. Occasional coyotes, foxes, Possums and dogs made quick cleanup visits and would get the birds grunting or cause them to suddenly become still and silent. Carolina wrens would land just inside of the canvas cover on rainy days and sing out tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle with verve and vigor in their newfound opera hall. In the heat of midday, fence lizards would skittle across the deck and amuse the eaglets. And also throughout the book, he kind of uses what I would call 1980s, 1990s dad language. Like, it just reminds me of things that might, like, certain words and terms that he uses throughout the book would remind me of something that my dad would use, like in describing like an eaglet. He would say like the little fur ball or the little scruffy guy or something like that. So yeah, the language is another thing that I really enjoyed about this book. And then also he advocates for outdoors education for children. He kind of is critical about children being on their screens all the time and how they can't really learn about wildlife just through a screen, but that it's good to get them in the outdoors. And he even has an outdoors education program himself, which I describe in my poem that I told you about earlier. Bearded Owl Gave Us a Gift. Again, so that's pretty much it. It's a description of the book, and I hope I've whet your appetite a little bit for this book. Again, if you're interested in this book and you want a chance to win this book, go back to my blog, my website, sarahoyerinde.com, and go to that particular poem called Bearded Owl Gave Us a Gift, and find out how you can enter your name into a drawing, into a contest for a chance to win one of 3 copies of this book. Also, you can order this book on Amazon.com. All right, so that is it. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, if you watched it, and for hanging out with me here, and for considering Hope for Wings and considering my website. All right, bye-bye.